Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, the Prime Minister has declared enough is enough as she's unveiled a four-point plan to combat Islamist terrorism following the London Bridge and Borough Market attacks.
But rewind to 2015, when the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, accused police officers of scaremongering over spending cuts and cuts to police numbers. But have these cuts now come at the cost of the nation's safety?
I have to tell you that this kind of scaremongering does nobody any good. It doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve the officers you represent, and it doesn't serve the public. Cuts have consequences. I know too that delivering more with less can be challenging and difficult.
Joining us now from Westminster is the Culture Secretary, Karen Bradley. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
20,000 police officers cut under Theresa May's watch as Home Secretary. Why would she accuse a police officer who complained about that of scaremongering when this is exactly what people were scared of?
Well, I think, first of all, can we start by paying tribute to the police on Saturday night and across the last few weeks. We're facing unprecedented threat. In the period from the murder of Lee Rigby to the Westminster attack in March, there were 13 plots that were foiled by the police and security services. In the 70 days since that Westminster attack, there have been 3 attacks got through and 5 other plots. That's 8 plots in 70 days. And I think we have to recognise that is an unprecedented increase in the threat. We're seeing terrorism breed terrorism, and the police have reacted magnificently. And on Saturday night,
well, hang on. There have also, sorry to interrupt, but there have also been an unprecedented number of attacks in the last few weeks. So I'd rather focus.
Well, that's the point I made.
Yeah, but rather than talk about all the successes, the point that Susanna made is surely a very important one, isn't it? Here we have Theresa May, who is expecting us to vote for her in 3 days' time, who, when she was Home Secretary, presided over a draconian, savage succession of budgetary cuts with the police, reducing numbers by 20,000, dramatically reducing our armed police as well. And when she was...
No, she didn't do that. That's not true. That is not true.
So the number... OK, well, to clarify then, do we have more or fewer armed police now than we did in 2010?
We have protected the counter-terrorism budget, which meant that specialist officers have been protected, and we have increased in real terms. But let's go back to the point.
Wait a minute. You challenged me, so let me just ask you. You
said that you said more specialist officers.
Let me ask you a very simple question. Do we have more or fewer armed police than we had in 2010?
We have protected counter-terrorism policing.
Do we have more or fewer armed police than we had in 2010?
An increase in the budget for counter-terrorism policing. But let's go back to Saturday night.
No, can you please just answer the question, please? You challenged me when I said that there had been a cut in armed police. I'm simply asking. I would like to ask you one more time. I want a straight answer. Do we have more or fewer? Do we have more or fewer? I will try one more time. Do we have more or fewer armed police than when Theresa May became Home Secretary in 2010?
We have
or less
seen a protection and an increase in the budget for counter-terrorism policing.
Do we have more or fewer armed police than we had in 2010?
Police officers on the streets. And that's why 8 minutes from the first call from the public on Saturday night coming through, the armed officers were deployed and the 3 terrorists had been killed. And I think we should pay great tribute to that. And you talk about the reduction in police numbers. Let's go back to 2010. There was no money. All parties agreed that savings need to be made. And the police have managed to do that while crime has fallen by a third.
Yeah, well, listen, you're sounding...
It's not just about the numbers, it's about the powers.
Yeah.
And the point was made
actually, if I can stop you, let me stop you. Because the man who she was talking to at the Police Federation conference in 2015, a man called Damien O'Reilly, had been a police community officer in Manchester for years, and he directly challenged her cuts and said, What you are doing is destroying community policing, destroying the ability to gather intelligence on the ground in communities. This will not help us catch terrorists before they commit outrages, and it will be a threat to national security. To which she responded, "Stop crying wolf." She said, "Less is more," and she basically sneered at these police officers. And now we have a succession of terror attacks from communities where police used to operate in far bigger numbers than they do now. And so my question to you is, how do you think that Theresa May's strategy of the last 6 years, when she was Home Secretary and now Prime Minister, of slashing the number of police on the streets and of slashing the number of armed police, how has that made this country a safer place, given the unprecedented number of terror attacks in the last 3-4 weeks?
I don't think that it would be fair to say that there was a slashing of anything. And actually, with police and crime commissioners, being elected from 2013 onwards, it's certainly in Staffordshire, in my constituency, we have seen more police on the street because of better deployment and better use of resources. But we go back to this choice that there is on Thursday. You have already in your piece talked about Jeremy Corbyn and voting against terrorism legislation. It is not just about numbers, it is about the powers. And Theresa May has never shied away from giving powers to the police. The record of Jeremy Corbyn is that he votes against every one of those powers that we have introduced. And that's the choice that people will face on Thursday. Do they want Jeremy Corbyn, a man who votes against powers, and his actions throughout the last 30 years have been that he does not support increased powers for policing?
When you say Theresa May has never been against the powers, in fact, Michael Gove very firmly recommended to her that she should be widening the umbrella of Islamist extremism that we could catch in the power net, and she resisted that and said that wasn't necessary. We've seen control orders reduced to these TPIMs. We have 400 jihadis coming back from Syria, and only 7 of those, only 7 of the people we've let back in who've been in a war zone, only 7 of them have these TPIMs. I mean, isn't it quite extraordinary that we now have 23,000 people in this country who are suspected jihadi sympathisers or indeed jihadis, and we have absolutely no way, apparently, of stopping them carrying out these outrages?
Well, let's talk about control orders, first of all. Control orders were being challenged by the courts. That's why we had to act. And the point of government and of being a leadership is to give the powers that the police need. Now, then it's for the police and the security services to determine the best way to use them, but upholding, of course, our values and our rule of law. We should never allow ourselves to stoop to levels that are unacceptable when we have a rule of law and we have values that we are proud of. We need to tackle terrorism in a way that is within the orbit of the way that we operate in this country. Okay, and that's what Theresa May has always stood up for. But let's go back to the point.
Let me ask you a point. Let me ask you a point. Do you know how many mosques there are in this country?
Look, this isn't a pub quiz, Piers. We are here talking about...
I'm sorry?
This isn't a pub quiz. We are here talking about...
I asked you how many mosques are in this country.
And we are here talking about a horrendous attack that happened on Saturday night.
Yes, by Islamist extremists who attended mosques. So let me ask you again. Have you any idea? Do you have any idea how many mosques there are in this country?
Like I say, I'm not here to take part in a pub quiz, Piers. I'm here to talk about a terrorist attack.
Do you know Do you know what percentage? Do you know what percentage of the mosques are believed to be financed by the Saudis and Qataris and are promoting the Wahhabi extremist form of Islam? Do you know that?
I think the important point is that we work with the community.
I think that's a very important point, wouldn't you?
The Muslim friends of mine are absolutely horrified.
Yeah, I'm not talking about your Muslim friends. I'm not talking about your Muslim friends. I'm asking you whether you are aware of the number of Wahhabist mosques in this country which are currently promoting an extreme form of Islam teaching, which many believe is linked to our extremists. I don't think it's a pub quiz, with all due respect to you. I think it's a rather salient question.
I think any mosque promoting radical extremism, any one mosque is one too many. Yeah. And we need to work with communities to make sure that we drum out that kind of extremist ideology. That's why we have to confront the ideology. That's why we need to work with the internet to make sure there are no safe spaces on the internet. Why we have to deal with segregation and make sure communities are working together. And why we have to review counter-terrorism legislation to make sure that our strategy and our approach is right in today's world with this ever-increasing threat.
Will you still be selling, as a government, will you continue, if you win the election, to sell millions, billions of pounds of arms deals to Saudi Arabia if they continue to finance and promote Wahhabi extremist teachings in mosques in this country?
I think we need to confront ideology wherever it is, and we need to make sure that we work with communities here at home and elsewhere. And we also have to remember that a close working relationship and sharing intelligence with our partners overseas saves far more lives than anything else. And that is why it is important that we do work closely with partners and allies.
At least one of the killers here was reported several times, right, by people concerned about his extremist behaviour. One of them was seen on television with an ISIS flag. People are concerned that even when these people are being reported as suspicious, absolutely nothing appears to be being done about it. People are very concerned. So I'm sorry if you feel like this is a pub quiz, but let me just ask you, how can you reassure people in this country that with 23,000 people believed to have jihadi sympathies in this country right now, that we are doing what is required to stop them committing outrages?
Well, we need to confront this at all levels. Now, I can't talk about the ongoing investigation, and we will certainly, at the end of that investigation, when we've learnt everything, we will look at the lessons to be learned from it and make sure that those lessons are dealt with and that we actually do the action that's needed. But it is about action and about a track record, and it's quite clear that Theresa May has been prepared to stand up to extremists, is prepared to take the action that's needed. Jeremy Corbyn has voted against every single measure, and the choice people face on Thursday is who do they feel will keep them safer, Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn?
How many extra... Sorry, after you.
No, well, I just wanted to ask, with 20,000 police officers cut on Theresa May's watch and 1,000 fewer armed officers, and 3 terror attacks in the last 3 months, are we safer?
I'm sorry, so Susanna, what do you mean? Are we safer than when?
Than before the police cuts?
Well, the crime has fallen by 1/3, and we have to remember the situation we inherited in 2010. But in 2015, it was the Conservatives that protected police spending when the Labour Party were calling for cuts of 10%. So we have done what was right by the police based on the economic circumstances we were in, and we have given the police the powers they need so that they can take action. And we saw on Saturday night an 8-minute response time. I think that
yes,
shows
absolutely
the resources.
Everyone pays tribute to those police officers. It's not individual police officers that anyone is criticising. But are you going to replace police numbers? Because to any people watching, more police are going to make us safer than fewer.
Well, I think that's a very simplistic argument. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner has been clear. They have the resources they need in order to deal with counter-terrorism. That is why we have increased spending on counter-terrorism, and that is why we will continue to look at this.
So you don't think we need any extra police officers or more armed police as a government?
I think it's about how we deploy police officers. I think it's about how we manage the resources we have. I think it's about smart policing, looking at the changing nature of crime, and about the powers. And if the police don't have the powers, it doesn't really matter how many of them there are. And Jeremy Corbyn has voted against all those powers.
3 terror attacks in the last 3 months, but the government is not promising any more police officers.
What we're looking at is how we deal with this on a 4-pronged way, confronting the ideology, looking at the internet and those safe spaces. There can be no safe spaces on the internet.
Why can't you answer a straight question?
And
Minister,
making sure that we review our counter-terrorism strategy.
With the greatest of respect, we need to feel secure in this country in the knowledge that whoever's in government after Thursday has a clue about what is happening. Either you don't want to confront the reality of police cuts, either you don't know
I think
whether
you're
armed
being
police...
too simplistic in suggesting that it's just about the number of police officers. It's about capability, it's about resourcing, it's about training, it's about powers. It is about more than just straight police numbers.
I'll tell you what's simplistic is when a community police officer of many years standing stands up at the Police Federation conference with Theresa May there as Home Secretary and directly says to her 2 years ago, your cuts are going to make this country more dangerous, they will remove community intelligence, that will let terrorism and extremism grow, and we will face threats to national security. That is a warning that has absolutely come to pass. There will be many who argue that Theresa May's cuts mean she now has the blood of our civilians on her hands. What worries me about you is that you, even when asked a simple question about whether the number of armed police in this country has gone up or down since Theresa May became Home Secretary 7 years ago, you don't answer that question, either because you're embarrassed by the answer or you simply don't know. Which one is it?
The number of specialist officers and the counter-terrorism budget has been protected and has increased in real terms. And that is they are the officers that we need in order that we can deal with the threat. But we have said we will review counter-terrorism legislation and strategy to ensure we have all the right powers. And it is about making sure that the powers are available, powers which Jeremy Corbyn voted against every single time.
Yeah, just finally, do you know if the number of armed police in this country has gone up or down in the last 6 years? Do you know the answer?
What I'm interested in is making sure that we have the right resources, the right powers and the right training and capabilities. I am assured by the police that they have that to deal with the counter-terrorism threat, but we need to look, learn lessons and make sure that we act where appropriate. And we need a leader who is prepared to take those decisions, and that is Theresa May.
Is there any reason why you can't answer the question?
Piers, we are here to talk about how the attack on Saturday, how we react to that attack and how we make sure on Thursday that we have the right person elected to Downing Street so that we can deal with it.
So you just don't want to answer?
Piers, we are here because on Thursday there is a general election, and in that general election there'll be a very, very clear choice. There'll be a clear choice between Theresa May, a woman prepared to take the difficult decisions, or Jeremy Corbyn, whose track record is quite clear. He votes against every power that the police and security services say they need. He is not prepared to back shoot to kill. He is not prepared to even admit whether he would push the button, the nuclear deterrent, if a bomb was coming to this country. Well, I'm afraid I think that's very worrying.
As you say, they have a choice. Some might argue that your resolute failure to answer a simple question repeatedly reveals a lot about you. Some would say that your complete apparent ignorance of how many mosques there are in this country is also rather worrying, but we appreciate you joining us.
I've been getting away with it all.